Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. I'm your host, I'm Rosie Gill-Moss. Throughout this podcast series, I invite people to come on and tell their stories about their experience of being widowed. It sounds like that's going to be very dull and very sad, and I promise you that it's not. We're going to speak to some of the most incredible people throughout this podcast. And today, my guest is joining me all the way from the land down under. Welcome, Colleen. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. And just before we came on the mic, I said, "Oh, what time is it there?" And it's nearly midnight. So I think,
Yes.
a little extra sort of virtual round of applause for you for staying up so late. Now, Colleen, firstly, I love that you found us. I love that you found us all the way in Australia, because that means that word is spreading. It means that people are accessing what I think is a really valuable resource. And it means that stories are getting shared literally globally. I mean, how amazing is that?
It's great.
So, Colleen, start us off in the way that is tradition. And because, as always, I know very little. I know that your husband was called Steve, and I know that he died from, was it motor neurons disease?
Yeah, or ALS in America.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to get you to just talk to me about Steve. Tell me how you guys met, and we'll get to the crunch eventually, but we'll get there how we get there.
Well, we met, I was 18 and he was almost 19, and his best friend started going out with my best friend. So we kind of hooked up.
This is the old school way of dating, right?
Yeah, old school way,
None of the
in
swiping.
a pub, out dancing. And 6 weeks after we started going out, Steve picked me up on a Saturday lunchtime. He used to play a lot of sports, and we mainly saw each other Saturday nights in a group setting, just out dancing with the group. And he picked me up at lunch and said, "Look, I really like you, but I just want to be friends. I don't want to be committed to a girlfriend. I just want to go out with the boys and have a good time, but I'll see you tonight," because we were still going out in the group. And then that night, halfway through the night, he asked me to dance, which he normally never danced till the last drink because he'd confident.
Typical man.
Yeah. And then we were in each other's arms and then had a little kiss, and then that was it. We were together for the rest of our lives. Yeah.
So for all his bravado about not wanting to commit and not wanting a girlfriend, you turned out to be irresistible, Colleen. I think that's quite the accolade.
Yeah, it was good.
So you became a couple and then progressed. Talk to me about that. When did you get married?
Yeah, so we bought a house when we were 24, got married when we were 25. And then we wanted to have kids straight away and fell pregnant quickly, miscarried about 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then couldn't fall pregnant. So the years went by, traveling, working, IVF, donor egg, gave up. Tried this Brazilian jungle herb thing that was in an office just 5 minutes from where I worked in the city, and fell pregnant just before I turned 40.
So I'm going to have to just stop you, and we're going to have to go on a little side quest here. What was this Brazilian herb?
Oh, so it was a bit crazy. We used to go down the beach for our anniversary in July, and there was a spread in the newspaper because we're talking when was it, 2006? And this woman did acupuncture and Brazilian jungle herbs, and she had great success with people that couldn't fall pregnant, and she happened to be in Melbourne in her office 5 minutes from where I work. So I would go in at lunchtime, and the first session, she had a really strong accent. Excuse me, sorry, I've got to, and she just put this spatula in the container and pulled out these herbs and said, "Look, it's got jungle energy on it." And I just thought, take my money. If we don't try, we'll never know.
Yeah, at this point, right?
Yeah, about 6 weeks later, I fell pregnant. So it was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So you had to take the jungle herbs suspended in vodka.
Oh.
And the guy would take them and I would take them, Steve and I, and they said had lots of sex. And it worked. So we had a joint 40th, and I was 6 weeks pregnant at my 40th, and I had a few friends that had fallen pregnant around that same time. So
that's incredible.
Sarah was born. It was fantastic.
And what a miracle baby as well. All the more special.
Indeed.
So I'm assuming that life at this point is pretty good. You've married the man you
good.
love.
Uh-huh.
You've
Mhm.
had a successful pregnancy. You gave birth to
Yep.
your daughter. I know her name is Sarah from my notes. So when did things start to not be quite so
Yeah.
peachy?
So just after Sarah turned 5, she turned 5 in September, and our school year starts in January because our summer's December, January, February. And Steve had said to me just after Christmas, have you noticed a problem with my speech? And I'm pretty airy-fairy. I hadn't noticed anything.
You had a 5-year-old. You had enough going on.
He couldn't say D's, S's, and like D's, S's, and T's, like where your tongue hits the roof of your mouth. And so we started having tests done in January, and MND, they don't diagnose it. They pretty much dismiss every other illness. And then there's a couple of tests that help define it towards the end. So he had a couple of unusual brain scans. So he didn't get diagnosed till June. And so Sarah was halfway through prep, which is like the one before year 1.
So you're left with quite a lot of uncertainty. You've had a couple of irregular brain scans. What are you thinking?
Sarah had started school. I just started a part-time job, and he had rapid progression. So by the time he was diagnosed, he had no speech, and his arms and hands had started to be affected. So we went on holidays in April, I think it was, up to the Gold Coast, and his speech was quite affected, and he didn't want to be talking to anyone. He'd talk to me, and then he'd lie in bed at night and he'd do that with his hands. And he didn't say anything, but I realised now, I reckon he could feel the muscles atrophying. And then he used to get these things called gesticulations, and it's the little nerves going up and down your arms. And people with MND, you can generally see it if you kind of like, not worms going up and down your arms, but you can see the muscles rippling. And and his hands had started getting affected, because we've got this favourite photo, which he actually had put in his coffin, of him and Sarah. And she was 5 and he's holding her. We're at a ride, and he was a plumber. He was quite fit. It's just crazy because he looks really, really healthy.
That's a scary thing, isn't
He's
it?
got this illness and he hadn't been diagnosed yet. So it was it was 13 years ago now. So there's a lot I sort of don't remember, but I think you just kind of get used to living life. I mean, Sarah was starting prep. It was really exciting. They had family barbecues at school and stuff like that. So then it's sort of counterbalanced by, okay, having these tests, take it step by step. Motor neurone disease, I don't think it was mentioned in the beginning. And then you can't, it's not diagnosed. So you just push it aside and just try not to focus on it.
And I know very little about motor neuron disease. I mean, I know that you're not a medic, or you might be actually, but
No.
presumably throughout your journey, I really overuse that word, with Steve, you would have learnt quite a lot about the condition. Are you able to give me just a little summary of what it looks like?
Yeah, it's basically where I think, actually, I don't know that much about it because I didn't really care, because I was just focused on looking after Steve, and because it's terminal, there's no cure.
And is it always terminal?
Always terminal. Once you
Right.
get it, that's it. You're going to pass away. So, but it's to do with the neurons stopping talking to the muscles in your body. So then they just atrophy. So your muscles gradually stop working. And depending on your progression, how long you have it, and what kind you've got, everyone's affected differently. No one's exactly the same, although there's commonalities amongst people, I guess. Steve had vulva, which starts at the mouth and goes down the body. And a lot of people have it starting at the feet and goes up the body.
So there's an awful lot of unknowns in this as well, because even the fact that they can't formally diagnose it without eliminating all other causes.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that you guys must have been kind of floundering around a little bit, looking for information. And I suppose what I'm trying to get to is the point where where the doctors, or by process of elimination, they're saying this looks like it's motor neuron disease,
Yeah.
and presumably you would then Google it, or did they give you the
Well,
prognosis?
no, interestingly, I think it was on the back of our minds when we were having some tests done, because I remember we were in one of the major hospitals, and I can't remember what scan Steve was having, and they asked if some student doctors could come in and have a look at Steve. And by that stage, he was still walking, but when their muscles atrophy, they lose the colour, they become quite pale.
Yeah.
And I remember these students looking at his hands and going, oh, yeah, you can see the atrophy, you can see the atrophy. And because I've got a background, I have type 1 diabetes, and because we'd gone through IVF and I found out through Steve's illness, I'm quite good at advocacy. So after they left, I went out to the students, or I went to the doctor and just said, look, you can't say stuff like that in front of someone who's not diagnosed yet. But long story short, the neurologist who eventually diagnosed us, when he did these baseline tests, that was about 3 weeks before he's officially diagnosed, where they put like electrodes on your arms and your legs and give you little electric shock, painful, and they test how your muscles react. So they do
it
it
was
based
painful as
on,
well.
yeah, and then they do one. They did one 2 weeks later, and by this time Steve had other symptoms, like his tongue was weakening, and when they do like neuro tests and they say push against my arm and things, so just even simple things like that. So when we had the second test, the neurologist said, "I've got to analyse it, and I'll see you in 2 weeks." She said, "It's probably, but I can't guarantee that it is MND. Don't Google it."
Right.
I Googled it, Steve
you
didn't Google it. So I had to be informed.
Do you think he didn't want to Google it because
Yeah, for
he was
sure.
scared? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did you share anything that you'd found with him, or did he just not want to know at all?
No, I didn't tell him. I can't even remember if we talked about it. You're just on a wait and hold. And so I don't think we really did. We just focused on Sarah and yeah.
And what about things like making plans? Because sometimes when faced with our mortality and terminal illness, some people will become very keen to, record messages to make sure their affairs are in order. However, doing this job, you hear all different reactions, and some people just won't acknowledge it at all until it's too late. And I'm wondering how Steve was within this. Were you able to talk about provision for Sarah?
Yeah,
what his hopes
definitely.
were? Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy comes to word, but basically by the time he got diagnosed, he had no speech, and we'd never heard of voice banking. So apparently you can voice bank and record messages and stuff. But because we didn't know what was going on with him, he couldn't do that. But once he was diagnosed, and I always remember they said, you're best to get all your affairs in order now whilst you're alive and whilst you can still do it. And a few weeks after he's diagnosed, we went to see a financial planner. And I remember it because he could still walk, but he had a really crooked gait. And we sat in this financial planner's office, and we're just there basically planning for when Steve dies. So anyhow, by the time he did pass away, we had everything in order. We had the will, how to handle all his money and all that kind of stuff.
Unfortunately, the realities of widowhood, aren't they? Especially when you have, joint finances or a child involved. You said here that his deterioration was fast, and he spent the last 2.5 years of his life with no movement apart from in his face and his eyes.
Yeah.
That is a very, very long time.
It is.
How did you all cope with that?
Well, it was hard. I think and I'm sure a lot of other people, when there's like illnesses involved, you kind of get used to coping with it.
You just crack on.
I knew from my past experience, peer support's fantastic, and we very quickly found some Facebook groups created, called a girls' chat. There's 6 of us. We're still in contact all these years later. We've been on holidays together. We've been to funerals together, all sorts of stuff. Because I knew, like you said, you don't always know what to ask. I knew from our background with IVF and with diabetes, you don't know what to ask. So often you need to reach out to people who've been through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm going off tangent a little bit.
I love a tangent. You crack on.
So I learned very quickly I was good at advocating and getting together a network of people who could help us, which would involve mainly the MND Association and associated health professionals, and just getting stuff that he needed and finding out what he needed. And you end up with a case manager, and where I live in Victoria, they have good funding. So we ended up with funding for carers.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
It just becomes your whole life, pretty much.
And you must have gone very quickly, as have so many of my other guests who've watched somebody die. But predominantly cancer is the sort of, I won't say the leading cause that I speak to. But with this, he became, from the sounds of it, so incapacitated so quickly that that shift from being his wife to his carer, that's a very difficult transition. And you mentioned that you had carers coming in. Did that enable you to preserve your role as wife a little bit as well?
A little bit. I heard someone talk about that in another podcast that you did, and I'd forgotten all about it, how eventually it changes in so many ways. It changes so that you can't help become more of a carer than a wife. There was a time, I sneakily got him on, I forced him to go on antidepressants. When he first got diagnosed, I went on them because I thought I was actually going to have a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a famous, in Melbourne where I live, there was a researcher who did research for MND, then got it himself. And he did an article
What are the chances?
Pound. Yeah. And he said he went to a really dark place for a while. And that's what Steve did quite early on, maybe 4 to 6 weeks after he's diagnosed. He wouldn't kiss me on the cheek. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. And I know. And I thought, I can't look after this guy we thought he'd live for 2.5, 3 years max. I thought, I can't do this if he's not connecting with me. So I was a little bit sneaky and a little bit bossy. And finally, the MND doctor explained to him how antidepressants work. He didn't want to go on them. And that sort of brought him back a little bit. But there's another time I thought he was transitioning. We had a really good palliative care counsellor, and I could feel him pulling back for me. And she said, quite often when people feel they're going to pass away, they're kind of transitioning and they're maybe getting ready for that. So they pull back a bit away from you. So it kind of came in and out, but we were very, very connected like the whole time till pretty much he passed away. But it definitely changes. Yeah. And there's a lot he didn't tell me as well, which I'm really annoyed about. You didn't get to be later.
Well, also, how about communication? Because you've got a fairly small child still who can't communicate with her father, yet he's physically there. How did they manage to communicate with each other?
Well, we learned very early on you had to say yes, no, just ask questions. And this is really bittersweet, but we didn't tell Sarah he was going to die. We didn't even say the word sick for a long, long time. And it was his highlight of the day. He'd be in a wheelchair at the back of the house. We had a long Victorian house, and she'd come home from school. Our dog would run up to the front door, and then Sarah and the dog would run down the hallway and just tell Dad about her day. So we all learnt to talk to Steve in yes, no, and there are a few different speech devices you can use, but he never wanted to use them until he was really too sick to use them. But he was set up on one where you could have a voice speak to you and you could have paragraphs, and he could point and say, hi, Sarah, how was your day? Sarah, go clean your teeth, all that kind of stuff. And then we also had what's called an alphabet board, and it's basically, have you heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we use that quite a lot as well.
Yeah. So, but that's quite admirable that you're managing to navigate this completely non-normal situation.
Yeah.
And this child who really, and one thing I've learned is that children, I don't like to say that they're resilient, because I think they just, they hold their grief differently, or their trauma. But if they have got primary care that's there and is looking after them, that's just their new normal, isn't it? And
Yeah.
so for quite a prolonged period of her life, that would have been her normal, would be that Dad
Yeah.
can't speak.
Yeah.
At what point did you have the conversation with her that he was very poorly and that this could be terminal?
Well, I can't remember exactly. It happened exactly how our counsellor said, and you'd probably relate to this with a lot of people, where she said, kids just like to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And when they're like, she was 5.5 when he was diagnosed, and she was probably about 6.5 when she heard he'd pass away. And she said that quite often they'll just throw something in the car just as you're about to drop them off. And that's what happened, was she went on a play date and I picked her up and she said, Mum, is Dad going to die? And I said, well, why are you asking that? She said, well, because Julie's grandma had cancer and she died. And Julie said, Dad's got cancer and he's going to die. And then I'm pretty sure the counsellor gave me this technique. And I think it kind of came naturally. I just said, well, you always come back with a question and you take it as far as they want to take it. So that time I said, well, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think she wanted to know. And then I just kind of said, oh, well, everyone dies eventually. And I think I said, yeah, Dad will pass away, but we don't know when. And kind of left it. And she was happy enough with that, because right from the get-go, even before he was diagnosed, we just wanted her to have a really normal, happy life. So even with all this stuff happening, you know what they're like. They love their play dates. They love their dancing. She loved school. She loved all of that kind of stuff. And that she used to have friends come over and play. And when Steve had the hospital bed, they'd, have the hospital beds go up and down, and they'd play in the bed. They'd play in his hoist, do all kinds of stuff. And we didn't show our grief around her for a long, 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 long time. We just kept it really matter of fact. Dad's voice doesn't work. Dad's leg doesn't work. And she didn't really care about her diagnosis. I don't know. She didn't really ask.
And I think often they do just take things at face value, don't they, kids? So we're sort of getting close to the crunch now, aren't we? We're getting close to the crunch.
Yeah.
As you've been talking, I've been thinking about this condition, MND, and I'm thinking, so if it causes muscle atrophy, well, the brain's a muscle, the heart's a muscle.
Oh, yeah. So good question. So Steve was quite lucky. There is something they can get called frontal lobe dementia. It can be really distressing. They can get paranoia. One of my friend's husbands had it. They start investing their money in strange ways. They might go on the stock market on the computer and invest their money. I read a few books that people had written, and this one person, she thought her husband had dementia, but it turned out that he got MND very quickly, but the dementia was the first symptom. And he used to travel a lot, and he went to Japan, and he rang up from Japan and he said, I've got no money left, because he had like, I don't know, 150 pounds or something, whatever, US dollars in his wallet. And he'd given it to a taxi driver, not realising the value of the money. Like he had to pay, say, $20 for his taxi fare. And so it could create all these issues. And Steve didn't really have that. He had a little bit of cognition, but not a lot. He had most of his cognition right until he passed away. So, yeah, his brain actually really wasn't affected. He had a really good spirit, a good personality, still loved to look around and have a good time. And
so that's I guess a blessing, isn't it? That he was,
very
although
much
he
a
was
blessing.
immobile, he was in there and able to in some way
definitely
communicate.
interact with everyone. Yeah.
So what happened at the end?
In this case, and in most cases, the diaphragm ends up just not working and they can't breathe and they pass away. So Steve's was complications, motor neurone disease with pneumonia. So he passed away from pneumonia. And so what happened was the first probably 2.5 years, because he was fit and healthy and we got good care for him, he did quite well. And then he started getting a couple of colds, and then he had 1 dose of pneumonia. And then he passed away in May, and probably about the March, April, he started getting a lot weaker. And then he eventually got, I think he had like 1 dose of pneumonia. A month went by or a few weeks, I can't remember now. And then he got like the final dose, and then he went into palliative care and passed away. So
And that must have been a really big moment for you all, the moment that he went
Yeah.
into palliative care, because although you've known for some time that this is the
Mm,
outcome, it's
mm.
still, you're never ready for it. And I don't know what Australia, we would go to a hospice here. Is that the same sort of thing over there?
Yeah. We don't really have, well, we didn't have hospice. We have palliative care wards. It's really hard to get a bed, like really, really hard. So the weekend that it was determined that this is pretty much going to be it and needs to go into palliative care, we had our palliative care nurse and our counsellor. They spent 4 hours together. I think they were both on the phone for like 2 hours trying to find a bed. And then we found a bed in two different hospitals, and Steve had to like make the decision within an hour or so, which one do you want? Otherwise I'll give it away to someone else. And the only thing I hated about him passing away, as much as you could hate something, was they needed the bed. So like 2 hours after he passed away like 8 o'clock at night. And there was a fair few of us. We're in a cancer ward. We're in the Olivia Newton-John Cancer Centre, Wellness Centre at the Austin in Melbourne, in the palliative care ward, which is mainly oncology. So he passed away, say 8 o'clock, and then it got to like 10 o'clock. And the nurse unit manager or someone came up and said, look, you guys are really noisy. This is a palliative care ward and people are trying to sleep and we need the bed.
Oh
So
my goodness.
we can't, and that's the only thing that was, like, I would have stayed with him. I would never have
Yeah.
left him until they kicked me out anyhow. But that's the only thing. All of it's horrible, of course, but you try and have the best experience you can with it.
And were you with him when he died?
Yeah. I felt his heart stop.
Oh, wow.
I felt the last two heartbeats. So so I don't mind talking about it. So he was in there and he used to use a CPAP machine at night. And then it was deemed he was sick enough that you withdraw, that kind of stuff. And that was a really sad moment because the people who give us the machines and train up us with the machines are located in the same hospital. So the guy who came to take the machine away knew us and he knew Steve. And he just kept saying, are you sure you want me to do this? Are you sure you want me to do that? Because he knew once we did, that was it. And I felt in some ways you feel sadder for them because they care so much. And then what I really appreciated was my palliative care counsellor spent about half an hour telling me what happens when they're passing away, how they can't drink, their body can't actually process the food or the water. And that's why, because he would have been on a drip, I guess, and he had a peg feeding tube. So you kind of stop everything at the end.
Were you worried about pain? Because
Oh, yeah, no, he's on heaps of drugs, heaps. He's on when we had a lot of comedy, so our palliative care nurse, when she first started coming to see Steve, she'd say, I've got to go, I've got to do my syringe drivers. And I never knew what a syringe driver was until I found out they're the morphine syringe drivers. And then when we knew this was going to be it, he wanted to pass away at home and I didn't want him to because I knew I couldn't care for him. And they said, the drugs you need, we can't give you at home. So he was basically just dosed up on lots and lots of things so that he wouldn't be in pain and so that he was like morphine, but other stuff as well.
yeah, because it's, when you think about the diaphragm, and the thought of somebody not being able to breathe.
Yeah.
It sounds, I have to say, it sounds like you get, quite good end of life care. I think it would be nicer in a hospice, but the idea that you've got a palliative counsellor, is this somebody that you sort out yourselves or is this something provided by the hospital?
I think it varies from state to state because one of my good friends her husband had MND, but he's in Queensland, they got no funding at all. And I don't know if they had a counsellor or not, but when Steve was first diagnosed, they thought he'd have a year to live and they didn't tell us that at first. So they put us in touch with palliative care straight away because they like you to get to know the whole team before you actually need them so you can build a relationship. This is MND Victoria. And I just thought that was normal for everyone. And it wasn't till a year or two later I found out that's actually not quite so normal. So they learnt a lot from us because we were the longest patients they'd had.
Oh,
Normally they only
take
deal
that
with
as an
someone for,
accolade.
I know, 12 months or 18 months, but they were with us for 3 years. And so my counsellor, I just did not want to give her up. I adored her. I had to withdraw. It was hard. And the nurse was just so much fun and really good. And we had a really good rapport. We had like 2 nurses that had come and visit us.
And I think universally, for anybody that has any hospital-based experience, it's the people that you come into contact with. It's,
Definitely.
Genuinely how news is delivered, how you say good morning to somebody. Those tiny
Exactly.
little things can make such a difference to both the person
Indeed.
who's sick and their family. And I think so often, and I don't know whether it's the same over there, but in the UK, we are very, very underfunded in the NHS and very, very stretched. And so sometimes doctors will give life-altering or even ending news in a very public place or in a very brusque manner or even over the phone. And I personally feel that there is so much more we could do about
Definitely.
that. Okay, so let's go back. So Steve he's died with, was it just the 2 of you? I do like to get a full picture.
When he passed away. So what had happened was we had his best mate, who's like a brother, and his best mate's wife, who's one of my best friends, and we've known them.
Was this the couple that were dating when you started dating?
No, that was a different one.
Oh.
But so they'd known each other. Steve and Paul had known each other since they were 15, and Steve was 50 when he passed away. So they'd known each other, and we'd been almost like family. So there was them, Steve's middle sister, myself, of course, and a golf friend. And the nurse said, "Oh, do you want to just leave the room for a moment? He's really sticky and clammy. I just want to wash his back down." So we went down to the kitchen, and then she came running down and said, "Quick." So Sharon, his sister, and myself went down, and then I just put my hand on his chest and 2 heartbeats, and then he was gone. So there was me and Sharon, and he'd already had the last rites done whilst he's in care. So all of that. So then we just started ringing family and a couple of close friends to come in.
And how about Sarah? How old was she at this point?
She was 8.5.
Okay, so that's a pretty tough age, I think. I know there's no good age to lose a parent, but at 8, they've got a little bit more kind of cognitive awareness and emotional awareness. So she will understand the concept of death. And again, if you don't want to answer, see, this is where things can get quite painful because we're talking about children. But if you could just take me back to leaving the hospital and having to tell Sarah that her dad had died.
Well, so this is another little story. He was in palliative care for, I think, 9 days. So she stayed with her best friend's family, who had helped out a lot the whole time and play dates. They're like a second family to her. And I actually can't remember. I think I rang and said to the mother, "Steve's passed away." And for some reason, I didn't ask them to bring her into the hospital. And our counsellor, it was like 6:30 at night, and I did cross the line, but I rang the counsellor. I had her number and said, "Can you go pick up Sarah? Steve's passed away. Can you tell her?" And she goes, "I'm at tennis." And I said, "Yeah, I know that Steve's passed away." And she said it twice more times, and then she realised I was just going to keep pushing. So she went. And she had a really good relationship with Sarah as well. Part of the care was they'd go on little coffee dates together and all stuff like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, she was a one out of the box. She's a fantastic counsellor. So she went and got Sarah and told her on the way and brought her into the hospital. And then Sarah didn't want to see Steve, and she's pleased she didn't. But it's like an event, I guess. I don't know. She came in her pajamas. She was happy to be there. And then I think she even went back to her friend's house that night. I can't remember. It was all what works best for her.
And kids, I know from my own experience, they react in very strange ways. And the kind of spectacle of it, the event of it, because it does. My home became a circus. People were bringing gifts and magazines, and the kids sort of, why are people bringing us presents? But they don't. They're so good at compartmentalizing this grief that, like you say, she couldn't find out that her dad has died and then go back to her friends for a play date because that's the only way they can. over here, there's a book that has quite a nice analogy, and it's about jumping in puddles. So they sort of jump in and out of their grief,
Oh, yeah.
which I have found quite helpful. But of course, you've now got to plan a funeral. You've got to deal with the aftermath. How were Steve's family around? You said his sister.
Yeah, so that's a really long story. He had, at that time, his mum and dad were still alive. He's got 3 sisters, and we're very, very close family. So we organised a funeral together at my house, and it was I had the final say in everything, but we all had a say in. So it was very fine to organise. There were no issues, and we all got to have an input on. And it was just when I say I hate funerals, I hated Steve's funeral. My whole concept of funerals has changed since he passed away. But we had your stock standard. It was a mass. Had the photos, had the songs, had all of that. Our carers came. We had a core team of 4 or 5 carers, and they all participated. Like, one carried in a cross, one carried in a golf club, and they all participated in the funeral. We were really lucky because we were in a city. We could choose. We had a big pool of carers to choose from, and MND is quite nuanced because of the muscle issues. So we had like a team that had been with us for 2 years. And so we're quite close, and we're still friends on Facebook with some of them and stuff like that. So, yeah, so organising the funeral, that was fine. It was after, when it's just you at home.
Yeah, because the funeral, caring for somebody, the initial aftermath, you've got a lot of phone calls to make, you've got a lot of supporting to do, and then the funeral, and then it is like tumbleweed, isn't it? It's like the world. And of course, there will be well-meaning friends and family and lots of people will care, but people will forget to check in. Their lives go back to some degree of normality. And you are left stranded in this kind of new world with no real clue of how to navigate it. I'm guessing that you were almost a solo parent in terms of the day-to-day parenting anyway.
Yeah.
But it's not having anybody to share the celebration, share the difficult bits. And it is an incredibly lonely time. So over the last decade, right? Now, I'm 7 years next month, and I can remember when I was first widowed thinking, I really don't want to be that sad in 7 years. God,
I know.
It's not what's waiting for me.
Yeah.
And really, I suppose, one of the most interesting, if you want to use that word, things I found out is that grief is so spontaneous, you know? Like, it can just come out of nowhere. And I would say like 75% of the time I go through my life, fairly even keel. But those flashes, right, from absolutely nowhere. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, if you are listening to this and you're thinking, shit, 7 years I'm still going to be really grieving, it's different, isn't it? It's different, the grief that you feel after the prolonged passing of
definitely.
time.
Yeah, it's been the last year or so's been absolutely the best. I was ready to go back and start counselling last year. And yeah, it's just so different. And just because we were together for such a long time, it's only this year really I've started reaching out and making new friends and doing new stuff. Haven't dated at all.
Oh, that was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. I've met 2 guys through those years, through different jobs, but they weren't. One lived too far away and blah, blah, blah. And I can't do the apps yet, not yet. Yeah, so of course, and because I'm involved in a few sort of like Facebook, we've got one called, I don't moderate it, MND Carers. So you can join as a carer, and in those early years, we would talk all the time or get on the phone when we could. And then we've got one called MND Angels. Once your loved one passes away, and then I'm into a couple of American ones as well. So you get to share, and a widow group in Australia, which is fantastic on Facebook. So you get to share a lot. So a lot of that acuteness is gone, and I'm so happy. It's just a distant memory. And now it's a lifetime ago now. It's a whole different lifetime. So yeah, it's very different.
And your daughter now, she's a grown up. She's 18.
Yeah.
And one of the big questions that people always ask me, and if you have children or a child, you will be asked, and it's what about the children?
Mm,
Now, I've written a whole chapter for my book on this because I think it's such a important issue that we understand what the impact of a bereavement has on them as they progress through to
mm,
adulthood. Because I know myself, I thought my kids were ruined. I thought there was no way they were going to live a normal life. They were going to be so damaged by this. And I can only speak 7 years in, but my kids are not.
mm,
You know, they are they're bereaved, and they will always carry a sadness, but they are kind of fully functioning human. I mean, cross my fingers,
mm,
they're still quite young. And so I think almost hearing from somebody like you, who has a
mm.
daughter who was a young child when her dad got sick and still a fairly young child when he died, how is she? How, I mean, I know this is not Sarah and podcast, but I'm
Mm,
genuinely interested to know
mm.
how it impacted on her as she grew up.
Yeah, she's really good. I asked her the other day in preparation for this, and she said sometimes she'll look at other people and say, oh, that'd be nice if I had a dad who could do that. But having said that, she's hooked into a couple of families throughout the years they're almost like fathers to her. And she also says, I know if dad was around, we'd have a different life and I'd probably be a different person. And I love the life I have now and I love who I am. And I think because it happened so young, she kind of doesn't know any different. And
Mm.
I think because in the early years, I didn't cope well at all. And she just kind of had to, she probably didn't know she was living around someone who did have depression or who wasn't coping. And I reckon and she, like, I have ADHD, I'm diagnosed,
Oh,
so does she,
me
and all it comes
too.
to, and she almost looks after me. She knows when to remind me to do stuff and things like that. So she'll probably realise once she's older, maybe she was affected more than she thinks she has been.
But it does
Um,
sound like you put in all the support so
yeah,
quickly. And I think,
definitely.
and this is no judgment on people, because like you, I did not cope very well either.
Mm,
And maybe we can circle back and talk a little bit about that.
mm,
And so it's very difficult when you're trying to keep your head above water. Terrible analogy for me. And you're also
yeah.
trying to get children's support. But I do think if you can be proactive, and it takes a lot to do it, getting the support in as quickly as possible seems to
Mm,
be, in my limited experience, the best way to protect them. And I think that kind of openness of, no closed conversations, even when they're difficult conversations, allowing
mm,
them to come to you and ask you things. And I think we are seeing that, our generation as parents, we're completely different to our parents' generation and their parents. And as you know, I've got friends whose parents died and they never spoke about them again. There was no
mm,
photos, no mention.
mm,
And so I think we've learned so much, and there is so much more information out there, that it doesn't have to signal the end of all that is good. And I
mm,
think that your daughter sounds like an incredibly insightful young woman, because she's
yeah.
right. I quite like the life I have now. My children are
Mm,
happy, but I also like the life I had. But
mm,
it's that acknowledgement that it will never be the same, but this is the path you've got, and you might as well
mm,
dance along it, I suppose.
mm. Yeah, for sure.
So if you're comfortable doing so, I do think that talking about coping and lack of
Mm,
coping and
mm,
depression and all the other
mm.
sort of comorbidities, for want of a better word, that you have around grief, are you comfortable just telling me a little bit about what that was like for
Yeah,
you?
sure. Pretty horrible.
Hmm.
When COVID happened and we had lockdown, I was actually quite happy. So I thought now everyone else feels as isolated as I do. And during that time, I wasn't doing well at all. And I had a job I wasn't doing well at. And Sarah actually didn't attend all of year 7, term 4. She did hardly any of year 8. And COVID was year 9, so it was online. And our school tried everything to get her to re-engage with school.
And
And
was
she
this her
wouldn't,
that she didn't want to go?
yeah, she could not get out of bed. She would not admit it was anxiety. She used to get terrible stomach aches. Like, I literally could not get her out of bed. And I tried everything except physically hitting her.
Yeah, got to draw the
Um,
line somewhere.
yeah. So long story short, we ended up seeing like this guy who helps people re-engage. He's like a counsellor. And we use strategy. So the first session we had, which you're probably aware of when you see counsellors, we spoke together, then we spoke separately to him, and then came together at the end. And after the first session, she didn't really want to come back. And so me and the counsellor said, well, what are we going to do to get her back? And he said, yeah, she's very stubborn. How about we say you're the one that needs the help, because she'll come back and see me if she knows you need help.
Yeah.
And I've actually not told her that. I don't think she can hear me.
She might do.
We never talked about it because we didn't talk about some of the counselling sessions, but he said to her, your mum needs help. Let's come back.
That tells me that she's an empathetic child, because a lot of children are very selfish by nature. That's just the evolution. And for her to demonstrate that sort of empathy and consideration of you at such a young age, I think is pretty impressive. We have some serious problems with school. I don't like the term school refuser, because I think that
school can't.
School can't, yeah. And interesting, I host a podcast for a group of autistic schools, and we're doing an episode on this. So I will let you know, because they are looking into, why the emotional side is, it's not a won't, it's a can't. And it's really, really common in the widowed community.
Okay.
And I think if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. These children, everything they know to be true and good has gone. They don't trust anything anymore, because if your parent can die, anything can happen. And then they feel like a freak, because kids are mean. I know many people whose kids have been teased because they've lost a parent. I mean, kids are shits, right? And kids, they don't want anything that makes them feel different, and the anxiety. And you can totally see why this little girl didn't want to go to school. Was she able to access her education in the end?
No, and that's the crazy thing. She walked right back into year 10 as though nothing had happened, and she's done really well. And she just did year 12 and did really well.
Good
and
girl.
got into the uni course, which is media and film.
Amazing.
And it's really interesting. Along the whole way from the beginning, when Steve passed away, one of her schoolmates, her husband, had passed away maybe a month before. She's connected with kids, and they didn't even know each other, had lost a parent. Like, she had this one friend, oh, Ruby can't come to my birthday. She's gone away. And then she found out afterward they'd gone away to spread her dad's ashes. So they'd both lost their dads, become friends, and didn't even know. Like, it's not something you really talk about at school when you...
No, and I think my oldest doesn't talk about it at school at all. Obviously, I made the school aware when he joined, but it's to give them as well that autonomy over their story. Actually, when my stepdaughter started secondary school, I said to her, this is your story. You can choose if you wish to tell people or not. Because when you're at primary school, that decision's kind of taken out of your hands. So secondary would be high school, so 11 plus. But I do think that, I mean, what a kind of a positive story within the shit bit, that your daughter was unable to attend school for 2 and a bit years, and then she managed to go back, get qualifications to enable her to go to university. My goodness, like, kudos to you and to her, because that must have taken some doing.
Yeah, she's amazing. It was really hard at the time, and the school offered so much. Just knocked it all back. You can't force anyone, so I just had to try and support her as much as I could. And I know, and Steve knew from when she was little, you cannot tell our daughter what to do.
I've got one of them.
She will do it in her own time, and she does. And even now, I just keep that in mind with whatever's happening. She will do it in her own time, and I'm there to support her and encourage her.
And we put so much pressure on kids to go through the motions and, each stage at the same time as their peers. And it's, how can we expect one 10-year-old to be exactly the same as another 10?
Exactly.
It makes no sense. And I always say to my kids' schools, it's emotional well-being first. And education, obviously it's important that they get the basics. Of course it is. And I'm lucky my kids are, they all enjoy the schools. But it's taken, my son went to 4 primary schools before I found the right placement for him. And I just think, as long as they can read and write and, do the basic maths and things, the rest of it will come. I left school before I did my A-levels, and I thought that was it for my education. And I went to university. I just found another loophole and went that way. And I do think this is important, that people hear it, that even if your child right now is not getting out of bed, they're not communicating, they're not going to school, and you are desperately worried, there is or there can be a silver
Yeah,
lining.
for
Now,
sure.
do you know what, I mean, only because if I was listening to this and I had a child that was struggling with school, I'd want to ask, was there anything, a catalyst that helped to change that? Or did it just happen organically?
I think it happened organically. I think in a way COVID helped because she could re-engage
Because
online.
everybody else had been off as well, and then they all go back together. Yeah, that makes sense.
And she just said, I'll go back to school with everyone else. I think she didn't want to walk back into the stigma.
No.
Because she'd gotten behind in her work, they offered her a school where, like a 2-month course, and it's 2 students to 1 teacher, and they focus on maths and English, and that's all they do, and it's to get you back up to speed so you could go back into school. But she didn't want to have to talk about why she'd done that and all that kind of stuff. And she just said, well, she said yes in front of their face, of course. They said, we went and did a tour. Do you want to do this? Yes, she goes. Then she goes home, she goes, I'm not doing that, Mum.
And you're like,
but she still stayed friends. She still did activities. So she still did netball and dancing. So she still saw her school friends. She didn't totally drop out.
That's really important, isn't it? Because I think when children are out of school, we have a responsibility to make sure that they have that social connection and engagement, and things like dancing and netball. They're fantastic. My younger daughter, she's an avid dancer. She little mum brain, she competes, and so I'm now learning that finding something outside of school where you can go and you can be a totally different person as well. That's a really good kind of tool to have in their armoury. And a career in film and what did you say? Media and film. See. Well, you know, if I ever pop over to Australia and need some Instagram videos doing, I know where to come.
We'll do a documentary.
Yes, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? That would be amazing. So you've said that there's no significant other in your life, but
no, it's really weird because I'm just turned 59, so I'm kind of looking towards retirement. Still working out who I am without Steve, because we were an us for over 30 years.
Wow, you were children, weren't you, when you got together?
So I'm kind of enjoying not having someone in that aspect, although I miss a lot of having a relationship. I can't say, I thought I would be partnered up or something after 10 years. So who knows? I don't really care at this stage. I just love going out, having a bit of a dance, or
and you're still
going to the movies or doing whatever. I know a lot of people meet on Tinder these days and stuff like that, but I don't want to do that yet. So,
and actually, if you're happy as you are, and it sounds like you're embracing life in all its forms, then you never know. Perhaps it'll happen organically, and if it doesn't, then I'm afraid you're going to have to download the app.
Oh yeah, for sure. I started sussing out a few people and saying, oh, if you know anyone, I'll let you know when I'm interested. Blah blah blah.
That's the way to do it. And you never know. There's always people dying. You might get a nice widow out.
Well, in the group I'm in, a few people have done that.
Yeah. Well, John and I are both widows. You know, I think that there's something about that connection between you, because especially when you meet quite early on, which we did, you're still so in the grief, you know, and you're still crying all the time, and you've still got the pictures. And I don't think a non-widow would have been able to understand or empathise with that to quite the same extent.
For sure.
So what does life have in store? You're retiring. You're going to go do a bit of travelling, something like that. Yeah. Where are you going to go?
I can't think of it. I still want to be around for Sarah before she really spreads her wings, because I know she won't be living with me one day and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm just happy to just plod along at the moment, just keep working on myself. And
you know what? Plodding sometimes just sounds lovely, doesn't it? I think all we crave when our lives have been shattered is peace, just a little bit of still water. And I keep using water analogies today.
Yeah.
Well, Colleen, it has been really, really lovely to talk to you. We said before, we've had a little chat on Instagram before, and I really love it when I've spoken to somebody before and then I get to meet them, well, almost in person. Now, for anybody out there who has been listening today and has got some questions, you might have some questions about motor neurone disease. I certainly did. So you can message me and I can always pass them to Colleen. We'll include some resources when we put the podcast out. So I've made a note of the Facebook groups you mentioned. And if there's anything else, please do send it over to me.
All right, no worries.
So thank you for coming on and
Thank you,
sharing your
Rosie.
story. Without people like you, this wouldn't exist because I'd just be repeating my story over and over again and people would get bored. And it's what you're doing is having an impact on other people. So people will listen to your stories. There will be somebody who has lost somebody to MND who hasn't heard their story before. It's making me go goosebump. I love the magic that spreads out from here. Anyway, I'll stop waffling on. If you, like I said, if you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will be back with you soon with another episode from the forefront of widowhood. Take care out there. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again and see you next time on Widowed AF.